As Elizabeth Holmes heads to prison, has Silicon Valley learned anything? Elizabeth Holmes tried finding a workaround, but the disgraced Silicon Valley entrepreneur must finally report to prison on Tuesday. Silicon Valley, for its part, has barely paused to notice. Federal prosecutors indicted Holmes 5 years ago on multiple counts of conspiracy and defrauding investors and patients through her failed Silicon Valley startup, Theranos. Convicted early last year on 4 of those charges and sentenced to 11 years and 3 months in prison, Holmes is set to report to a minimum security prison camp about 100 miles from Houston. Holmes made multiple efforts to wiggle out of doing time, including repeated maneuvers by a legal team estimated to have cost more than $30 million. She allegedly contemplated fleeing to Mexico. And since her conviction, she and her partner, Billy Evans, conceived a second child. She gave birth in February. Holmes revealed in a fawning profile in the New York Times, which recast her as Liz, that she has been volunteering for a rape crisis hotline. Holmes' saga was always a Rorschach test for how to think about the Valley, a cautionary tale that either exposed the fake-it-till-you-make-it mentality of startups or served as a prime example of the deep-seated misogyny in the technology industry. How is it that a woman is going to jail while the Valley, although chock full of geniuses, still shields a remarkable number of entitled male grifters cashing in on all the ready money? More likely, Holmes will be remembered as a colorful executive who lied about what her company could do and suffered the consequences. When her trial began in September 2021, much was made about what her case said about an industry that changed the world, and not always for the better. Yet despite her black turtlenecks and Stanford dropout cred, neither Holmes nor Theranos was really of Silicon Valley. Her venture capital backers weren't among the A-list investors who had funded the likes of Apple, Google, and Facebook. Theranos was a medical device company, a totally distinct, and, truth to tell, junior varsity, subset of the information technology ecosystem. But with a bit of hindsight, it's already clear that Holmes' conviction and Theranos' failure have had zero impact on the hubristic culture of the startup world, tut-tutane predictions to the contrary. As you read this, entrepreneurs and investors who run the gamut from charlatans to visionaries are setting aside business plans focused on vague cryptocurrencies and the blockchain and refocusing instead on generative artificial intelligence. Sad you never figured out crypto? Don't be. VC investments in the technology behind the popular ChatGPT revolution grew more than tenfold to $4.5 billion last year from 2018. A new gold rush has begun. Despite widespread layoffs, tech companies large and small are humming along. Apple, Microsoft, and Alphabet, Google's parent company, are each worth well over $1 trillion. Nvidia, which supplies semiconductors to computers that host the large language models that power AI applications, has supplanted Intel as the dominant chip kingpin. Creative destruction continues to chew through companies of all kinds. A self-serving argument has crept up of late that somehow Holmes was singled out for something other than defrauding investors. Holmes was acquitted on all counts related to patients, and the jury couldn't agree on whether she defrauded early Theranos investors. To some, that means Holmes is being incarcerated only for having hoodwinked the big money likes of Rupert Murdoch and Betsy DeVos. Tim Draper, a veteran VC who invested in Theranos, said recently that Holmes didn't lie to him and that her prosecution would deter other entrepreneurs, especially women. Echoing that, the Times article that attempted to salvage some of Holmes' reputation noted that her defenders believe the feverish coverage of Ms. Holmes' downfall felt like a witch trial, less rooted in what happened at Theranos, and more of a message to ambitious women everywhere. Don't girl boss too close to the sun, or this could happen to you. That's some snazzy writing, but it lands some distance from the truth. I attended day after day of her ennui-inducing nearly 4-month trial in San Jose, and I saw just how fair a shake Holmes received. She was convicted by a diligent jury of her peers, responding to instructions by a judge who gave Holmes every opportunity to defend herself. Having been there, I can confirm that the trial was very much about what Holmes did and didn't do at Theranos. And let's not forget the Theranos fiasco also snagged a guy, Sunny Balwani, Holmes' former romantic and business partner, who was also convicted and sentenced to federal prison in a separate trial. Silicon Valley, in all its brilliance and arrogance, its paradigm-shifting moonshots and its spectacular failures, just keeps iterating, in most ways oblivious to its own shortcomings. The captivating rise and fall of Elizabeth Holmes did nothing to change that. As Elizabeth Holmes heads to prison, has Silicon Valley learned anything? Elizabeth Holmes tried finding a workaround, but the disgraced Silicon Valley entrepreneur must finally report to prison on Tuesday. Silicon Valley, for its part, has barely paused to notice. Federal prosecutors indicted Holmes 5 years ago on multiple counts of conspiracy and defrauding investors and patients through her failed Silicon Valley startup. On this Memorial Day, take a moment to remember service and sacrifice. I don't know where I will find myself on Monday when taps are played at the National Memorial Day program at Arlington National Cemetery. But count on this, I won't be partying it up at a backyard barbecue bash or dashing from store to store in a shopping mall catching doorbuster sales. I also can't say whether I will devote an hour or minutes to remembering the fallen. But I know with certainty that some time will be spent giving thanks for the men and women who shed their blood and sacrificed their lives in service to the United States. They were brothers and sisters in a military uniform that I proudly shared as a commissioned officer in the Army. At his dedication of the battlefield cemetery at Gettysburg in 1863, President Abraham Lincoln spoke of the sacrifice of the fallen troops as having given the last full measure of devotion to the nation. Generations have given their all. A few of them were college classmates and fellow ROTC graduates who returned home from Vietnam in flag-draped coffins. There will be no picnics for any of them. They won't be joining any trips to the mall or family get-togethers. They, and the more than 65,000 U.S. service members who were killed in Vietnam, Iraq and Afghanistan, will never know what it's like to get a day off the job, to gas up the car and hit the road. And regrettably, many of them will be simply forgotten. But we can't let it go with that. What then am I asking? Take a pass on holiday sales? Close the grill? Spend Monday wearing sackcloth and ashes as an outward, ostentatious sign of mourning? Perish those thoughts. But to reduce Memorial Day to just a grand occasion to kick off the summer is disrespectful of those who gave all they had. Besides, Memorial Day has a special resonance for this DC native. We still don't have what we have rightly earned as citizens, full and equal representation in Congress or full authority to govern ourselves. Yet the service and sacrifice of DC residents in the protection of the country, which should be a source of national tribute, is not even afforded an afterthought. Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton, Democrat D.C., however, has detailed the costs borne by the district in a resolution introduced in advance of Memorial Day recognizing D.C.'s service members and veterans. Most Americans,